What's going on, folks? Happy 2015 and welcome to the latest edition of Retro Corner. This Retro Corner is going to be a big special episode. Kind of wanted to do something special to start off the new year, so we're going to be going over my top 10 NES games. The NES was probably the best system ever created. I don't know what it is about it, whether it was the cartridges or the overall aesthetics of the system, but this system always appealed to me as a youth and still appeals to me as an adult now. So, without any further ado, let's check out my number 10 game for the NES. Coming in at number 10 is Kirbys Adventure.
Kirbys Adventure is one of the most technically impressive games for the NES. Released very late in the system's life cycle, Kirbys Adventure could easily be mistaken for a Super Nintendo game, graphically speaking, with an awesome color palette and smooth animations. It was so much more than that, though. Kirby was a very unique character who could suck in enemies to get their abilities, such as gaining a sword. Couple this with the fact that the game is just amazing to play, and Kirby's Adventure is one of the best games on the NES.
Coming in at number 9 is a timeless classic, Final Fantasy.
While Dragon Warrior may have introduced the traditional Japanese RPG system, Final Fantasy was the game that brought it into the mainstream. Playing as a group of 4 warriors of light, Final Fantasy was an epic adventure that had a variety of classes, towns to visit, enemies to battle, and a timeless soundtrack. The prelude theme when you start the game is arguably one of the most memorable and well pieced together songs in 8-bit history. While time may not have been fair to the graphics and the menu interfaces in the game, there is no denying that this game is still a very playable and enjoyable game even to this day, and very deserving of a spot on my list.
I loved the cartoon as a kid, I love the game as an adult. Coming in at number 8 is DuckTales.
While TV and movie tie-in games and current gaming are usually a lackluster affair, the NES featured some amazing games from this genre, usually coming from either Capcom or Sunsoft. Capcom's DuckTales is proof of this. Staying true to the source material by featuring characters from the show such as Scrooge McDuck, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and even an appearance by the badass Gizmo Duck, the game managed to provide a perfect blend of familiar content with new gameplay ideas. DuckTales was not only one of the finest TV tie-in games on the system, but one of the best platform games on the system, period.
Coming in at number 7 is one of the most badass chicks in video games, Metroid.
Metroid is one of the most well-known games on the NES, and for good reason. It's amazing. Players got their first look at Samus, who has to go throughout a world in space collecting power-ups to advance to different areas of the world. While most games used the level system at this time, Metroid was an open-world platformer with the limitations of exploring an area being reliant on your equipment. With a variety of different weapons, enemies, and a killer soundtrack, and one of the biggest twist endings in gaming history, Metroid is a fine example of Nintendo's early game creating skill.
A sports game on a top 10 list might seem like a far-fetched idea, but this game is definitely worth number 6, Tecmo Bowl.
Most 8-bit sports games tend to suck, but Tecmo figured out a way to break this mold with Tecmo Bowl. Featuring real players, real player abilities, and team cities, Tecmo Bowl was a classic football game with a simple style that replicated an NFL experience. You would think a football game with only 4 plays to choose from would be limited, but you never really felt that way with Tecmo Bowl. Also, Bo Jackson literally killed bitches in this game with his running game. While Tecmo Super Bowl may have been a technically superior game, Tecmo Bowl will always hold a spot in my heart as the king of football games. Hell, I even remember my dad picking me up early from school once because he was deep in a Tecmo Bowl season. When's the last time something like that happened to you? Exactly.
Get your whip ready for the number 5 game on this list, Castlevania III.
The Castlevania trilogy are some of the most iconic games on the NES, and Castlevania III was my favorite of the bunch. While the first game was a fantastic experience, Castlevania II was a bit of a sidestep for the series. Castlevania III corrected all of that though by returning to the roots of the first game of the series. Playing as Trevor Belmont, Castlevania III featured non-linear story progression with branching routes to choose from, multiple characters to accompany you, and even multiple endings. Featuring some of the best graphics on the NES, mixed with an awesome soundtrack, Castlevania III was one of the finest games on the system, and is just as fun today as it was when it was originally released.
The NES was filled with great beat-em-ups, and number 4 is my favorite beat-em-up of them all, Double Dragon.
I don't remember many things from 22 years ago, but I remember the first time I played Double Dragon. I was 7 years old, I was hanging out at an older friend's house named Joe. Joe and I were playing the standard NES games when he looks me dead in the face and says, "You ever played Double Dragon?" To which I said, "What is that?" And the rest is history. Double Dragon is a game I have played for years and I never get tired of it. Beating ass to some of my favorite music on the NES is always just so satisfying. While Double Dragon 2 may have been a better overall game than the original, and Double Dragon 3 sucked, as far as my personal enjoyment goes, Double Dragon will always take the cake as the best of the 3 games on the NES.
You can't have a top 10 NES list without having everyone's favorite Italian plumber. No, not my Uncle Vinny. It's Super Mario Bros. 3.
Super Mario Bros. Made Nintendo a household name by making video games accessible to everyone. Super Mario Bros. 3 was the pinnacle of the series on the NES, and is not only one of the best games on the system, but one of the best games of all time. By expanding on the first game of the series, Super Mario Bros. 3 added new abilities, new power-ups, new level designs, and a new overworld. Super Mario Bros. 3 was filled with secrets and hidden items and had some of the best aesthetics on the NES. Super Mario Bros. 3 is a timeless classic that is as charming and powerful today as it was when it was first released.
Enter the land of Hyrule for the number 2 game on this list, Legend of Zelda.
By combining top-down action gameplay and RPG elements, The Legend of Zelda blew people away when they first laid eyes on it, and destroyed their soul when they first played it. Playing as Link, you must save Princess Zelda from the evil Ganon by collecting pieces of the Triforce to gain the strength to fight him. Featuring a top-down open world, exploring with Link was just as fun as the dungeons in which you would fight in. Clever puzzle design, a great musical score, and tight gameplay made The Legend of Zelda one of the finest games on the system. The cartridge was even unique, with a gold surface that made you realize just how special this game was.
Now you might be saying, what could possibly be number 1 on my list? I've pretty much covered it all. Well, this is my number 1 game on the NES, Mike Tyson's Punchout.
Much like Double Dragon, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out has a special place in my heart. Before I had an NES, I remember going to my uncle's house and watching him play it on his massive 32-inch TV, and was just blown away by the awesomeness of this game. Mike Tyson was the most badass dude in the world at the time of the game, and his game was just as badass. The game featured some of the most creative characters ever in an NES game, and the gameplay was just so crisp and awesome. Playing as Little Mac in a true underdog story, you box your way through the ranks fighting classic characters such as King Hippo, Piston Honda, while finally making up your way to Mike Tyson, who will literally knock the shit out of you. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is still my favorite game to this day on the NES, and while it might not be number 1 on everyone's list, it is number 1 on my list.
Alright, and that's going to do it for my top 10 NES list. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Welcome to 2015. There'll be lots of cool retro corners, lots of cool Nintendo Enthusiast related stuff in this year, so be on the lookout for it. I hope you guys enjoyed this list, and if you agree with it, let me know. If you like some of the games I chose, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't. If you don't agree with this list, that's cool too. Give me your top 10 list down in the comments below and we'll talk about it. Hit me up on social media, do what you gotta do, and I'll see you guys later in the year 2015. Later.
This episode of Retro Corner was brought to you by NewWaveTraders.com. For your retro gaming and toy needs, check out NewWaveTraders.com.